Evening. Welcome to another episode of a conversation about race from a mother's perspective. Donna and I have had the pleasure of having many guests on our show, and we are super, super excited about tonight's guest. We've had judges, lawyers, sports moms, but we today have another sports mom who's phenomenal. We have an educator, a writer, someone who has done so much above and beyond her role as a mom and her role as a just a woman. She really reaches back to her community, reaches back to mothers and families in her companies, in her organizations, within her teams. And I'm so honored to have her on tonight. I'm going to let her do the introduction because she has just a phenomenal resume, and I would not do it any justice if I didn't, if I tried. But let's welcome. Oh, obviously my co-host Donna Marshall is here, and we would love to introduce Deborah Johnson to our Mothers Against Racism family. So, Deborah, tell us a little bit about yourself and your story and why you're just such a phenomenal mom and a phenomenal woman.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that. And it's a pleasure to be on your show. Wow, where do I even begin? You know where I'm a mom. I'm
Yes.
a mom, and I, a big part of who I am uh, has everything to do with me being a mom, but I'm a sports parent advocate. When my children started playing sports, I realized that that was a bigger role in my life than I could have ever imagined. I started out in HR. So never could have imagined going from HR to where my world took me, working with sports, working with athletes, working with moms. But I started off there. I graduated with an undergraduate degree in French, of all things. I'm
Huh.
always telling people
No.
I just have a passion for people doing what makes them happy. And I tell young people, what does your heart tell you? What does that heart tell you should do? So that's what I did. I majored in French. When my brother told me if I majored in French, I may as well go on welfare because they make about the same amount of money. He was wrong. I majored in French because I had been speaking French since I was 7. And by the time I got to college and went to France for a quarter, I had so many hours in French, it just made the most sense. And before I was done, before I knew it, I was done. And I joined the Peace Corps
Oh,
and come back
wow.
home. Yeah, joined the Peace Corps, went to Niger, a French speaking country. And I went there because they couldn't get anyone else to go. They kept
Huh.
saying it was really hard to get people to go to this third world country that was in the middle of
Mm.
nowhere, landlocked. I was right Mali and Chad, right in the middle of the Sahara. And so I went. And then when I came back, I taught French for a little bit. I never thought I would teach French, but I realized that being a French teacher was not going to afford me the things that I wanted to do in life. And so I wound up going to grad school and went to Brandeis and got a degree in social welfare policy and became a presidential intern. And it just turned my life around. I became
Wow.
a presidential intern, was there for 5 years, 2 years as an intern. I was going to be there for a short period of time working for the government. And then I was going to go off to help find housing for elderly. That's what I was focused on at that point. But instead, I stayed. And before I knew it, I was living overseas and I was on Guam. And then I came back and I was at the headquarters of Tactical Air Command. And I was working for the Department of the Air Force for 10 years. And then I
Wow.
got to Ohio and started building a federal agency here. And I was just like on a roll, right where I wanted to be with my career. And then I got that voice in my head that says, you know, you can't stay here. You know that this year your gig is
Oh.
up. And I kept thinking, all I need is 5 more years and I can retire. And the Lord was like, no, you need to leave right now. I had three sons at home, elementary school, middle school, and high school at the time. My high schooler was being recruited for football all over the country. My middle child was dealing with depression, and our youngest child was dealing with dyslexia and trying to learn how to read at third grade. And that's really what got me home. It got me home knowing I need to go home and see about my boys. And so I just let go. That was a big deal for me, but I let go and came home. I was recently remarried at the time, so that was a big deal to come home, quit my job, and be home with 3 boys. But some cool things happened because of that. That's when I started learning about the process of recruitment. I had no clue. I loved football. I can't even tell you how much I love football. I was so excited that my son was playing. but I knew nothing about the recruiting process. And all of a sudden, every time I looked around, my phone was ringing. And my son came down the stairs one day and said he had gotten a call from a coach, and he wanted him to get in his car. And he said some guy named Lou Holtz had called him. He didn't know who he was. And I'm like, what the heck? And I was like, Jay, when someone calls you, you tell them, please hold for one of my parents. This was before cell phones took on a big presence. And so you could get an extension and everybody could be on the phone. And before we know it, we were every week going to a different school, getting another offer. And all he wanted to do was play for Ohio State, which is my alma mater. And when he finally got that offer, he shut down recruiting. All those places I was going to go and have fun, checking out Boston again and going to South Carolina, he was like, I am not messing this up. And so he did that. And before I knew it, I was headlong into the machine of Ohio State football, which was very different than going to school and watching football. And then you realize it's not like high school. Parents didn't really have a place except to, they let you know what was going on. They let you know where to drop your child off, what was going on, but your child was a grown person. And so I felt so out of sorts from the time my children were little until then. I was used to being very involved with the process. And all of a sudden, there was no role except to drop your child off, find out where your tickets are, and go to the game. And as things would have it, it was Jay was in Coach Tressel's very first recruiting class, and they went to the national championship that first year. So national championship, our first year out. I'm so excited, I don't know what to do. I called Jay the day we found out. Oh my gosh, where's my packet? I don't know what you're talking about. The packet. I mean, there's got to be a parent packet. The packet that tells us which hotel, the parties. There's got to be all kind of fun stuff. And he said, "Ma, I don't know anything about a packet. You need to call Coach Tress's office." And I called, and she said, "I'm not sure. I don't know about a packet." There was no
This
organized.
what year was this?
2001 or 2002. 2002.
Okay, okay.
So there was no parent organization. So we're getting there. Our kids have a gorgeous hotel. Parents are scrambling to figure out how this works and trying to find a place. And when we got to that game and won the game, I was standing with another parent, and we looked at each other and said, this will never, ever happen again. We are going to figure this out. And we came home and got an attorney, started a 501c3, and became a booster organization. The professional football player. I mean, I'm sorry, the football players, the football players at football players of Football Parents Association at Ohio State University. And it
Ah,
took us. The
okay.
reason why I'm stumbling over that, it took almost 2 years for us to get the name approved by Ohio State because of licensing. We couldn't be the Ohio State football parents because Ohio State's name is licensed. We couldn't be just the football anything organization. So we wound up being the Football Parents Association at Ohio State. Finally was able to get that through without violating anything. And then we started an orientation for parents. We started finding out that not all parents have a place to stay for every game. We were just doing away games. Can you imagine if your child is playing at a big university and you're all excited, only to find out all the hotels are filled up, and they got the hotels fill up a year in advance. So now, but we didn't know that. So we had to get a travel committee together. And then one parent raised her hand and she said, Deborah, every one of our games are a game. We're from Florida. So we need to
Right.
have a hotel here. So then we started hearing people's situations. We started having an adoptive parent program because there are parents who can't make a game. We had one of our players was one of 9 children. His mama was working sometimes on Saturdays, couldn't be there. There were walk-on players who may only play once or twice in their career. But we had our own photographer to make sure that we got a picture of that kid playing, that his parents had that we made badges with our kids' names on it. We had professional photographers. We did all kinds of stuff, and we learned a lot about the plight of parents when their kids play collegiate sports. And that became my journey. And I really started getting a real hunger for helping other parents. Um,
Can I interject here? I just am curious
Absolutely.
about something.
Mhm,
And this is not related to anything except that I always am concerned about college athletes in particular
mhm,
that kind of used and abused kind of
mhm.
thing.
Yeah,
And, who watches out for when they are, there's an injury, in particular a head injury.
yeah.
Who watches out for them? Rather, I mean, because, and I'm not saying Ohio State, I'm saying just across the board
No, I
here.
hear what you're saying.
Who's watching out for those young people, in particular, if you're the son of nine, have
Right,
nine siblings,
right,
eight siblings. So
right.
is that something else you dealt with at all?
We talked to parents about that. We had all kinds of education that came into play. We brought in trainers that would talk to parents. I wrote a book called Coaching the Dream, a parent's guide.
Okay,
And what I told you, and I still tell parents, nobody cares about your child more than you do.
that's right.
That you can never abdicate your responsibility as a parent just because your child is playing at another level. And particularly at 18 and 19, these are still babies. You better watch out for. I mean, there were kids who were having death threats when they would drop a ball and might
Oh,
mess up a game. There are rabid fans out there that are scary. So you got to keep your eye on them being healthy. You have to get them to make decisions that they wouldn't normally make. My son was injured, and I had to talk him into not playing until he was fully well, even though they had cleared him to play. But I kept telling him, it's the only body that you get. I mean, when my middle child, who I think is my big story for recruiting, my middle child, Joshua Alexander, was at University of Kansas, and he was sick, and no one told me. My son, who's kind of dramatic, so I would call him. Kansas is hot in the summertime. I'd say, "Hey, Josh, how you feeling?" "Mom's so sick. It's so hot." "Well, Josh, you know it's hot. Drink some water. Well, if you're sick, go see your trainer." I'm thinking he's just being dramatic. He went
mhm.
from the spring being scheduled to start at his position to me getting there, my husband and I getting there in August, and he had lost 40 pounds. Nobody called us. They had given him four different prescriptions and never reached out to us and said, there's something going on here, really. And they didn't follow up with the specialist. We had to come in, get a specialist. He had the worst case of tonsillitis. And the coach tells me, well, we just thought, he had an attitude problem. Your honor student had an attitude problem. Your scout team player of the week every couple of weeks is now an attitude problem. Are you kidding me right now? Now, Kansas had gone through three coaches in a 5-year period. And so Josh had three coaches during the time that he was there. And he went from this child who was just so excited about playing, so excited about what he was doing. And I finally told him, you have a contract with this university, Josh, to go to school. You do your best, but the reality of it is you get what you came for. You came for your degree. You told me you wanted to go to school and not have to have college debt when you left. Think about this as your part-time job. Give it your best. Stop worrying about playing time. Stop worrying about what's going on. Do what you need to do. Do well in school. If you can't be a big time player on the field, be a big time player in the classroom. He was a
That's
writer and
right.
an English major, but you have to get in your child's head
Right.
because things can get to be really scary during that time.
Okay,
So
so
we
I'm
had to
gonna,
do that.
yeah. So I'm gonna throw another curveball in there on you,
Okay.
because I think that you have a very unique perspective,
Hmm.
and I think from what I can see, I don't know the statistics,
Yeah,
but I understand that I'm going to guess most of these football players, are men of color.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay, and I believe most coaching staffs are white.
that's correct.
Okay, so did you deal with any kind of racism? And I'd like to hear about that perspective from you, if you don't mind.
Um, Honestly, I wouldn't say I dealt with racism more than I dealt with just the realities of politics,
Oh,
the political environment of your child being at school and helping them to understand it's political just like jobs are political. The only thing is that they are 18, 19, and 20 years old and don't understand. how the process works. Um, there are people who I who I believe are taken advantage of because they don't have someone to speak for them.
Mm.
If you don't have a parent who is there, who can speak up, who can say, wait a minute, this isn't right. I was a major advocate for kids being safe. And in some situations, young people get hurt. The university doesn't pay for them to be hurt. Your insurance pays for it. The university is not paying for it. And then there's like less than 1% who go to the league. And then these young people leave damaged and
Right,
no one's looking out for them going forward.
right.
So they will
What,
use
right,
them. Yeah.
right. Use and abuse. That's
Use
what
and
I call.
abuse. Oh yeah,
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 yeah. And
yeah.
so you've got to somehow get education. I'd say a lot of the universities really do. They try to make sure kids are properly educated, that they get good tutoring, that they have a plan for after school. But I wouldn't say that's every school.
That's
And
right.
I've heard horror stories from parents who say once their kid couldn't do anything for that school, they moved on to the next player. And often the young person doesn't know how to advocate for themselves. They don't know the strategy, the game, things you should and shouldn't say. And so they're learning the hard way. Um, and you do see favoritism. You see the young people whose parents are coaching, their parents are big time boosters. I mean, that's just the reality. They're going to get maybe an opportunity before another person does until the skills just bear out. And I've seen that firsthand.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's
So I
my
think you
that's
and
my
I,
biggest concern. Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
think you and I, Deborah, have a lot in common because both of our children have played professional sports
Right.
or is playing professional sports, and your son Joshua went on to play for the Oakland Raiders and several
Jay played. Yeah.
J
Right.
and for the Oakland Raiders and several different NFL teams.
That's right.
Now, from my perspective, I'm sure for you as a mom, for our children, sports is not only just something they do; it's an outlet,
Yeah.
it's a passion, it's
Yep.
something they are gifted with
Yep.
and are
Hmm.
able to do at a professional level.
Right.
So use and abuse is one thing, but from our perspective, it's something that they love to do. It's something
Absolutely.
that really they see as a gift and as a talent.
Right.
So, so my thing is, where do we draw the line from? Obviously, our children following their purpose and their passion,
Yeah.
and the outside, the industry, the
Right.
business aspect of it all,
Yeah.
using them to benefit their, financial, situation or their companies or their whatever. Like,
Show me the money.
it's not even
Right.
about that because honestly, I'll tell you right now, my son will play basketball for nothing. He's
Right.
not
No,
Because
no,
they
playing for the
love
millions.
what
I'm
they
not
do.
talking about the
Yeah,
kids. I'm talking about
no,
owners.
exactly. So my
Yeah.
Owners.
point is, they'll play for nothing. My son grew up
That's
playing
right.
basketball 5-on-5 in a park with
Right.
with one street light showing
That's
him where the
right.
basket was.
That's right.
So they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it for the passion, and it's their purpose, and it's something that they excel. Black men do not excel in a lot of things, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But sports is something, football, basketball is something that they excel in. And unfortunately, we are majority in that situation. So it
Right.
looks like it's used and abused. But in your perspective, what can we do as mothers and in terms of giving advice to owners and giving advice
Right.
to coaches to treat our kids fairly? Because they will do this, I'm sure, at a minimal. It's not about the millions. It's about the love of the
No.
game. So what would be your advice? And I know you've done a lot with every company and
Yeah.
LLC you've developed. You've
Yeah.
given mothers and families a platform to stand up for their children so that
Right.
they're not used and abused and they're
That's
educated
exactly right.
on what goes on behind the scenes with contracts, with playing time, with
Right.
travel. We want to be a part of that. And we want to make sure our sons are getting the excellent experience and they're not
Exactly
using the
right.
word. So that's my question for you.
And young women now too, because think about
Yes, the
Oh, and we have
WNBA,
women as
correct.
well. Oh,
So
yes, it's men and women.
and I know you've done a lot. So talk about that. But what would be your advice moving forward for mothers who have kids that are going to be in the situation that our sons were in?
We have to make ourselves educated about the process. We can't be stars in our eyes about it because sometimes parents are so caught up. They're as excited as the young person is about this. Oh my gosh, my kid finally made it. I mean, there's so few young people who make it to professional sports. So when
Mhm.
they get there, they can lose, parents can lose their perspective. You really have to understand your child is fighting every day to play the thing, to play the sport that they absolutely love. Somebody has to be doing the research, figuring out what's going on, how this works, making the connections, getting to know the lay of the land, and taking the time to walk them through that. Sometimes they don't even have time to open their mail. You've got to keep an eye on it. Not that they're little kids or anything. It's the reality of the fact that it's a short window and they're trying so hard to do what they're trying to do. You've got to be educated. If you don't know, then find out. Get with financial people. Find out what the long-term career is. Do some research on the team. If there's a way for you to get involved in that community, it's like anything else. If you are involved in a community where your son works or plays and you have a voice there, they are seen differently. They are treated
Huh.
differently. When you can show your value to that team, it makes a difference. And then
Hmm.
you have to be in your child's head. You guys have to have a conversation, and it can't start right now. It has to start when your children are 7 and 8 and 9 years old, when they look for you as the biggest voice in the room. I am such an advocate of parents sitting down at the table with their children, making that space for conversation, listening to them, so that when the stakes get higher, the place where they go is back to that parent. And when you don't know, be okay with saying, I don't have a clue about that. We're going to have to both sit down and
And we'll
figure this
find
out.
out. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Call an attorney, call other parents. You have to form alliance. Got involved with the Professional Football Players Mothers Association. It was the only place where I could go where moms were similarly situated, where moms understood the process. It wasn't basketball, it's not golf. That football has its own thing. I mean, can you imagine that your child gets drafted on draft day and may not be on the team in August? Who knows that? Who has any idea that that could happen until it happens? And so when you have another mom pulling you aside and saying, "Oh, watch out," or "My son played for that team. Let me tell you about how that." And you can talk to someone and they have a similar path, so they can understand what you're talking about, and they're not trying to pull from you. They're trying to add value to what's happening. So you got to have a circle of people around you. You get yourself a team, and it starts early. And that team gets to be different with your child depending on what's happening. But I had people who could talk to him about finance, people who could talk to him about getting in his head when there was a lot going on. I mean, it's really tough when you get cut the first time and you thought you'd be there forever. When some coach lies to you and tells you all you have to do is X and we got you, and you do X, Y, and Z and they don't have you. And then there you are. I mean, when my son first started playing, every week they were fighting for their job. Can you imagine getting a job? And then you go to decide to buy a house. You said, "Man, I'm making good money. I can now put down for a house." And then 2 weeks later, you don't have a job anymore. It's gone. And in football, there was no guaranteed money except your signing bonus. And every week during that contract that he was in, you could just be snatched and be gone. It could be all over. That's a lot of pressure.
And that still
Ex-
goes on in the NFL,
mhm.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I
And
think
it's
you've
the
done a
only. It's
I'm sorry,
brutal.
go ahead, Donna.
It's a brutal sport for professional players. I think
Donna,
that. Oh,
your
you can't
dog.
hear me.
The dog.
Oh, yeah. Um,
Obviously, we're live.
He's really interested. He's really interested.
but for me, looking on and seeing, and seeing, he should like to join the conversation. Um, for me, looking on at these young players, these young men in the NFL that take a physical beating week after week, it's brutal. It's brutal, and that this no guaranteed about being paid. Any week you can just be gone, and I've never understood that mentality of why this exists. I mean, I don't know why I don't understand it. I've never understood it.
You know what? I tell people this, and I know this is a hard thing to hear.
Okay.
When you love what you love,
Mm-hmm.
and it's what you know what you're signing up for. Like parents will say, I can't believe that, your kids are getting hit and they're doing this every week. But they go in understanding that this is what they're signing up for. They absolutely, if you talk to any football player, they're going to tell you there's a level of freedom that comes with all out aggression. When you talk about Black
Mm.
men who are dealing with microaggressions every single day, and finally, they are someplace, and when they're dealing with all this crap in their lives,
So they could hit.
and they can just hit. Nobody's getting
Okay.
arrested for it, and they can run with abandon, and
Okay.
they can get their peers. This admiration from their peers. They can keep pushing the envelope on their athletic prowess. It just feels good.
Mm.
As a parent, you want to make sure they don't cross that line where they are. It's unsafe. You don't want to be that young person, male or female, who gets hit one too many times.
Yeah.
But you have to make a decision for yourself. It's something that you got all kinds of docs seeing about you. I tell parents, make sure you see your own doctor. My son was injured and he was told to play hurt, and they figured it out at the end of the season. And I told him that's the only body you're going to get. It's the only knee you're going to
Oh,
get.
I
You need to come
love
home
that.
and see your doctor. He said, Mom, if
Right.
I do that, I'm going to get cut. I said, that's okay. You'll still have a knee. You can still walk. And he came home and he got cut. And within about 6 or 8 weeks, he was playing for the Seahawks and went to his first playoffs of his season. Of his career. So, it's worth it. But you got to be able to see the big picture. But young people doing what they absolutely love. It's like race car drivers. We know how dangerous that could be, getting behind a wheel, going, 140 miles an hour. But for the people who decide to take that on, they know what they're getting themselves into. I know it's hard for somebody who, can't even imagine why you would do that. But people don't understand why people do what they do.
Hmm.
And in our chat room, someone wants to know how much did your faith play a part in your decisions?
Oh my gosh. It was the absolute for everything of all of my decisions. From the time I walked away from my job to praying for my kids, what they're doing. It means everything. I trust God. With your kids, sometimes they make decisions that you don't even go along with, but it's their life. You have to just say, Lord, would you protect my child? I'm just putting them in your hands, and I trust you to make sure they're okay. When there's all kinds of decisions out there, I had to know that if something didn't happen for them that they wanted to have happen, I knew God had a better plan for them. And that was the way I was able to talk to my sons when things didn't go the way they wanted them to go. That was the only thing that kept me sane and level.
Stacked against them,
Oh gosh, yeah.
being black male as a
Oh my
mother, and
gosh,
we
yeah.
talked about this several times. All we can do sometimes is pray. And
That's right.
I was actually talking to Donna about this the other day, because I felt that Jacob Blake's mother, when
Mhm.
she was asked to kind of
Oh.
send a message at her first press conference, and I said, for me, I would have cussed somebody out, I would have
Yeah.
wanted to fight, like I would have wanted to kill someone. And she
Right.
simply was calm and said, peace, just pray.
Yeah.
And for us as black women, sometimes that's
Yeah.
all we have. And
That's
believe
it.
me, it's the best thing that we have.
That's right.
Our faith and our ability to just give it over to God and to protect our children, because there's a lot stacked up against them in this world.
That's exactly.
And it's very unfair. They don't start off at the same starting
Oh heck
block as
no.
everyone else. And
Right.
we have to kind of mentally and spiritually push them through and over the hurdles sometimes to
That's
get what
right.
they deserve, whether it's because of their physical attributes, their talent, their sports talent.
That's
It's what
right.
they deserve. It's what they deserve.
That's right.
Your boys deserve those opportunities. And my son playing for the LA Clippers, he deserves this opportunity that he's getting.
That's right. They
And
work
it
really
came with a
hard.
lot of sacrifice as a mom, a lot of
Yeah.
sacrifice, I'm sure, from you,
Yeah.
for your children. Just speak on that a little bit. Speak about how raising them in this, and I know right now that your sons are a little bit older and
Right.
probably can kind of decipher what's going on in this world for their own. without
Right.
your
At this point.
perspective. But when
Right.
they were younger, were there any situations or experiences where you had to sit them down and kind of explain to them how they're perceived, unfortunately, in this world as Black males?
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that particularly the two oldest ones, they're tall. They're 6'6". They're a big presence. You can't miss them. And things would come up, and they would say, "That is so not fair. I wasn't the only one, Mom, that was doing that." I said, "I get it, but you're gonna find out in life. The big black guy, everybody's gonna know it was you." I said, "It could be a whole sea of white boys, but it's one big black guy, and they're gonna know it's you. Everybody knows who you are." I know it doesn't sound fair. Life isn't fair. I remember one time he's saying, "Oh my gosh, how could," I said, "But they know who you are." I see my background was labor relations. I go to a labor conference. When I come in 5 seconds late, hey, guess you ran out, because there was a whole sea of white men, and then there was me. So they would know when I was late. I tell them this is just the way the world works. You just got to understand that you're always going to be singled out. People are going to be watching you. They may not even remember what else is happening, but they're going to remember you. And it's like a big bullseye. They're expecting you to either not do well, or they're watching every little thing that you do and dissecting what it is you're doing. So you have to be better. You have to do, get there early, stay late, put in the work. Is it fair? Well, no, but life isn't fair. But they need to understand this so they know how the world works, so they can work their way through that. It's just how it goes. But it's not fun to watch. And as a parent, sometimes, you have to know when to speak up and when to sit back and talk to them about how to speak up on their own behalf. I remember my son, who played basketball and football, was angry that whenever he switched from football, especially if football ran into playoffs, the coach then would ding him for coming late to basketball. And so he wouldn't get the chance to start. And I said, well, then you need to talk to the coach and explain to him why you think you should. And you would see him finally starting, and he's out of breath, running back and forth, because football is very different than basketball. But I
Yeah.
remember a time when a parent called me and said, FYI, I just heard the coach is not going to let Jay play because he has braids. What? I said, oh, I bet you that's not going to happen. She said, I'm just saying what my son told me. He said something to Jay, and I called the assistant coach because I couldn't find the head coach. And I let him know, I bet you that better not happen. I'll be there and all over you if that happens. You don't have a policy about hair. Now all of a sudden you don't like my son's braids, whether you like them or don't like them. If that's what he's wearing, that's what he's wearing. And he better be able to play. And he did. But just the idea that stuff
How
like
old
that
was he?
comes up. He was a senior in high school. A senior in high school.
You were there as his
Yeah.
voice, as his support system.
Yeah.
And a lot of young athletes don't have that, or they don't have, their parents don't feel the confidence to step up and say, no,
Right.
this is wrong. But
Yeah.
you had that perspective, you had that knowledge, and you stood up for your son. And then they
Yeah.
knew, we can't mess with Jay. We
Right.
can't
Well,
mess
because
with
sometimes
Joshua.
coaches can kind of be bullies. I had a coach who told my middle son that if he went on vacation, he's not going to be in the Ironman competition. It was all these non-mandatory, mandatory training all summer. And I tell him, look, he is in 10th grade. This is the only time I have with my child. We're going on a family vacation, so he won't be in the Ironman competition. I tell Josh, get over it. It's going to be okay. And he says, well, I tell you what, if you don't, if he doesn't come, or if he goes on vacation, he's not going to start. And I said, well, who's going to start if you don't start him? He said, well, I don't know. I told Josh, don't worry about it. When the fall came, he started. I mean, when you run a 4.40 and you're 6'6", who else are you going to start? I mean, that's the other part, but you have to have the confidence in knowing what your
That's
kid
right.
can or can't do. But if
Right.
you don't speak up for your child, then who's going to speak up for them? And they're often not in a situation where they feel comfortable enough to do that. But there's a lot of shenanigans that go on and different things that go on, and you want to just make sure that they're treated as fairly as they can be treated, because we know life is not fair.
Okay. These are another layer we were uncovering here tonight, Dave.
Yeah.
Donna and I and several of our guests have had very intense conversation about generational racism and systemic racism.
Yeah,
And obviously, both play a part in what's happening, what's been happening in this country for a very long time.
very long
Can
time.
you give us a definition of each? What's your definition of generational racism as well as systemic racism? And what have you done as a mother to combat those with your boys, or continue to do for mothers and families across the country? Because I know you do a lot of things right as we presently speak.
Yeah. I mean, I taught institutionalized racism at Ohio State.
Ooh.
And
Oh
yeah,
yes.
the interesting thing was they wanted me to teach it. They wanted me to do a class on football and young people playing football, but I didn't think that that was as relevant as young people understanding about institutionalized racism. And it's absolutely systemic. It's so ingrained in the system that it's a knee jerk. It's like breathing. People, whether it's redlining, whether it's
Mm.
people are situated where they can't do better, whether you have food deserts that are so systemic to a lower income
Mhm.
areas
Mhm.
that happen to be um, areas that are mostly minorities, and it's just perpetuated. It's always in the system. It's like when, oh, I tell people this all the time. Um, when they show the kid on the news, they say there was a shooting, and this black kid and he had a hoodie on, and this happens. But when there's a white kid and a shooting, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to even hear about it. But if you do hear about it, it's kind of breezed over. There's no picture. They might have a name, but no picture. But when there's a black kid, there's a picture. So then people start to um, think, to put hoodies with kids who are doing something wrong. I had a black person, which was very sad, say to me, "But what was Trayvon doing with the hoodie on, Deb?
Oh,
He should have known better."
he might have been a little cold.
But the reality of it is, I said, "What was Mark? When you see Mark Zuckerberg in a hoodie, are you scared? Do you fear for your life? Do you grab your purse? Does that hoodie bother you? No, because there are certain things that are ascribed as bad, and it's always black, dark, certain things in society. And we have to be vigilant about what's going on when those messages are being transmitted. We have to challenge them. We have to say, my kid has every right to be able to wear that. If that's what he enjoys wearing. People say, well, I don't know if we should allow them to wear Air Force Ones or this, because that's no, we have to challenge that and say, well, why not? Why is it that if you wear a button-down shirt, it's a that's now telling people that they're doing well and they're probably smart. But when they wear a t-shirt or a hoodie or certain kind of garb or certain hairstyles, there's something negative that goes along with that. So you have to constantly push the envelope. I remember getting out of college, and my mother told me, "You're gonna have to do something with that hair, baby. You can't get a job with that hair all over your head." And this is before the laws that said that women could wear, natural styles. Can you believe there has to be laws for women to wear natural styles? I mean, that's
Wow.
that's that's pretty outrageous. So you have to. The reality of it is, in some situations, you cannot make a change unless you're in the system to make a change. So you may have to tell your child, I get it. You have a right to wear whatever you want to wear. But until you have a voice that can be heard, you need to get your foot in the door. So, no, it's not fair. But some of it is just, this is what you look like when you work here. This is what you're going to have to do if this is a door you want open. And then you walk through that. And then once you get there, and once you have established who you are and your knowledge base, then you're able to bring other people along. You're able to now have your own personality about what you're doing. But you got to sometimes just get in the door. But that walking alongside, it's not fair. I mean, it's not fair. I use that word a lot, but it's there. It's this generational stuff has happened so long. And we have to help our kids to understand. First, you get your foot in the door, and then we have to make some changes. Then we have to bring people along. Then we have to educate people. You have to make people uncomfortable. You have to challenge what people say. I was an HR director, and I was on a senior management team. And a guy from Alabama, one of our operating locations, walked into the room. I'm the only Black person in the room. And he walks over to me and he smiles and he said, "You must be the EEO officer." And I said, "You must be from Alabama." I said, "I'm the HR director." I
Oh,
said, "I'm
wow.
gonna let you get away with that once, but you're up north now. You know that doesn't work around here." And I know that makes people a little uncomfortable, but you have to be able to challenge stuff that doesn't make sense. When people say things about, how scary it is to be on certain parts of town, you have to ask them, "What do you mean by that? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?" But you really have to challenge people's notions, or they repeat something. I walked into church and a woman walks up to me who is a greeter, greets people when they first walk in. And she says, "Oh my gosh, finally found out what the deal is with Colin Kaepernick." This is a white woman talking to me. And I said, "Really?" She says, "He's dating a Muslim woman. No wonder he's doing all this craziness."
I'm sorry.
And she was
Wow.
dead serious.
Serious.
Now I have to sit and break this down to her. And then she's apologizing. And then she said someone else told her that, and she was just repeating what she heard. I said, "People are just walking into church in the morning, and now you're passing on misinformation about Colin Kaepernick." Now, of course, you mentioned Colin today. He's an absolute hero. Back then, he was the scum. They just felt like he was un-American. People didn't take the time to understand what his message was about. But if
Yes.
we didn't speak up when it came up, that kind of stuff continues to be perpetuated. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we have to be aware of, and we have to have conversations with our kids about. And they have to be okay being who they are. My kids have a pretty strong personalities. My oldest one in particular. And some days I would say, "Oh my gosh, did you say that?" And he'd say, "Yeah, Ma, that's how I felt." I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, maybe he said, Ma, that's how I feel. I have a right to speak how I feel." And you have to appreciate that. Absolutely appreciate that.
And I created this platform for these types of discussions,
Yeah.
because not only does it enlighten our audience, but enlighten mothers across the country to trying to navigate through what's happening and
That's
try to
right.
learn how to have these conversations with their children, whether they're young age or
Yeah.
teenagers or adults. I mean, it's consistent. It doesn't end. And I know, as a mother, you never
Yeah.
stop worrying about your child in today's
Oh,
society.
especially
Like, you don't,
now.
yeah, you can't sleep until you know that they're home, safe
Right.
and sound. You wake up in the morning worried about them and their day
Oh
and
my
what's going
gosh.
on.
That's it.
So these types of conversations is necessary and needed. And you've enlightened us to a lot tonight on how you have managed to open your children to these types of discussions and say, listen, it's not fair. I know it's not fair, but this is
Right.
what you have to do to get your foot in the door. This
That's
is who
right.
you have to be. And when you're there, this is how you have to act. And still, they still were able to have their own personalities and their own
Right.
strong voice, right?
That's
So
right.
it works. It works to kind of guide them through
Right.
these murky waters, but yet allow them to have their own voice and develop their own, philosophy and their own understanding of what's happening. And I think you've done a phenomenal job with that with your boys. Yeah.
Thank you. And when you're having difficult conversations, I would go so far as to sit down and have them rehearse what they're going to say. Whether it's with a job, when something comes up, just kind of the role play. Let's talk this out so that you can hear what they're going to say, and then maybe guide them along those lines. Um,
Right, right,
the
right.
older they get, the more they can command their own space. But then they just hit those bumps in life that are just tough. They're tough to deal with. And so it helps to have those conversations. I really believe in
Reaching
conversations at
back.
the table.
Yes, and you're reaching back too. I mean, you're
Yes.
probably, you're not done with impacting the lives of young athletes, with
Oh,
impacting the
not at
lives of
all.
parents. Like you've reached back, you've learned, you've taught, you've educated. Now you're reaching back. You're creating these platforms for
Right.
this knowledge and these conversations and resources for
That's
your
right.
for your athletes and their families. And we're hoping that this Mothers Against Racism can be a resource
Oh God.
for moms and for people just trying to figure out what's going on in this world and what can we do about it. And I think when Donna approached me with this idea, it was the weekend after George Floyd's murder.
Mm,
And she just sent me one text and says, we must do something,
right.
you know? And I think once and even Safatia Bacon, the mayor that we had on last
Yeah.
week, said, let's stop, and this was her message to white people. Let's stop saying we're sorry. We know we're sorry. We know you're
Right.
sorry. Let's
Right.
do something. What changes can we make? How can we influence? How could we adopt? How could we impact the lives of the young kids that are coming up now?
That's
Let's stop
right.
saying we're sorry. We know that it's happened. It's unfair. The systemic racism, general racism. But if you truly want to be impactful, you have to reach down and pull someone up, educate them.
Absolutely.
And I
And
think
use
you've
your
done a great.
privilege for good. When you're
And your
in the
platform.
room, when you
Yes.
can when you can dispel myths, when you can speak up and your voice can be heard, then use your voice for good. I mean, that's where it's powerful. When you just don't allow things to just go past because no one else is there in the room to hear that it's happening. But if you're there and you know it's not right, then speak up. I mean, that helps tremendously.
I think it's easy for you and I, as parents of professional athletes, to just be complacent and say, "Oh, thank God we're getting this notoriety. Thank God we're getting this money. Thank God we can live above the
Right.
means,
Again.
that's different from our people." But we're not
Right.
satisfied with that.
No, not at
It
all.
doesn't mean much with us. We want to make sure it's fairness across the board. We want to make sure our sons aren't used and abused, and we want to give the generations and the parents behind us the tools to have the knowledge as to what goes on with your contracts, have the knowledge as to what goes on with your child when they're in this situation and they're not playing because of X, Y, and Z. Speak to them. So
Right.
I think we're not complacent. It's not, we haven't
No.
reached utopia where we could sit back and say, okay, we got millions of dollars, or they have millions of dollars,
Right.
because I ain't getting any. But you
I
know,
know that's right.
you
And
know,
when you're in
but
football, often it's not millions of dollars. They're
yeah,
taking them away as fast as they can get them.
we're standing up for our people. We're standing
Yeah,
up for our children.
that's right.
And Donna and I created this platform for this conversation to continue, and for mothers out there to know that they need to stand up and have a voice for their children when they don't have one. And even
Oh,
when they do, consistently remain being that source of strength.
right. But it goes one step further. It's not only now I listen to you two mothers and talking about the different issues you have, but it's all mothers standing up for all children. And the only way we're going to stop this and create an equal platform is for mothers to say all children are created equal and
Yep.
must be treated equally. And we must end the generational racism. When
Yep.
we end generational racism, then we're going to have a different story to tell.
That's exactly
But
right.
it's all of us together, and white people need to stand up with people of color and say, we're all rising to the top.
Yeah.
It's time. It's time for people like me not to just sit back and say, "Oh, isn't that too bad?" But we have to get out there and say, not only is it too bad, but we're going to bring this to an end.
Yeah. Anytime you have a spotlight, I always believe this. I tell my children this. God has given you a platform.
Mm,
You got to decide what you're going to use that for.
mm-hmm,
And when it's a platform that's this big, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, the hockey, whatever it is, sports is the number one pastime in the world.
mm-hmm.
There's no mistaking about that. People pay attention. So when you have that opportunity, we have to use it to push change. So I really appreciate what you're doing with your platform, how you're using your voice to make a difference. It just makes a difference for every little person. You know the starfish story, right? The little kid walking down the beach and the tide goes out and the starfishes are like there's like thousands of starfish and the little kid's running down and he's throwing one in and he picks up another one, he's throwing it in the water and a guy comes up and he's watching this kid and he's going, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, the tide's out, they're going to die if I don't get them back in the water." He said, "But there's thousands of starfish." And he says, "You can possibly make a difference." And he just kept picking it up and throwing them in. He says, "But it made a difference to that one." And
Oh,
as we
good.
make a difference to each one, every
Mm-hmm.
time we do something and we make a little bit of a push in the right direction, before you know it, it's a snowball effect. But every time we have an opportunity, we have to grab someone, bring them along, take the time, whether it's on a forum like this or whether it's sitting, in a cafe or in the line at the grocery store. If you have an opportunity to have a conversation, it makes every difference in the world.
Yeah, I agree. Deborah, we're going to have just an FYI for a future upcoming speaker. We have someone coming from the Whitney plant. We have someone that's going to be on from the Whitney Plantation. Have you heard of the Whitney Plantation?
I have not. Tell me about it.
The Whitney Plantation is a plantation in the New Orleans area, and it's from the perspective of slaves. It's not from the perspective of landowner. And this particular woman that's coming on, her ancestors actually worked on this plantation. They were slaves. Wow. So really, we're very excited. And so we're uncovering yet another layer. And,
that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I think
go ahead.
I was just going to say, particularly for African-American children, anytime you can enlighten and enhance your child's knowledge of their history and who they are so they can stand up stronger and stand up taller, it makes such a difference. We were talking about this weekend, we were in Alabama visiting an 86-year-old aunt, and I was telling her, certain things we weren't when we were little. And if I had known, I would have felt so much different about myself. I remember the first time I found out my grandmother had a college degree. I didn't even think Black folks at that age had, that during that period of time had college degree. I just felt so much better about myself knowing. I used to tell people that I would bring it up in conversation any way I could fit it in, that my grandmother had a college degree. That we found out later that the original stonemason at the University of Virginia is our ancestor. And so we went and they built, they then acknowledged a building with his name on it, and they brought our whole family in. And just knowing a little bit about your history changes your whole perspective. I found out that everyone on that slave plantation knew how to read and write, even though it was against the law. And I thought, well, no wonder we all love to write in our family and read. I have a brother who's published almost 60 books now, and I realized because we come from a family of readers and writers. But I think as parents, we have to tell our children that. We have to let them know who they are. Because the more they can hear about themselves, the more they can feel good about themselves. It kind of, it doesn't take away all this foolishness, but it does help to help you feel good in the midst of it all.
So I think it's remarkable, this woman that's going to be on, she has her doctorate. And, here she is come full circle back to this plantation where her relatives were slaves. And now she's teaching about it. I just can't wait to have her on. What a story to tell. So thank you so much for being with us.
A pleasure.
We've met such wonderful women. I mean, it's just been, what a journey we're on. Every time we have a guest, it's like, wow, another eye opener. You have so much good knowledge to share to not only children of color, but to all children with this, this whole thing. I always worry about children in sports and the, I think it's beautiful. And I raised quite the student athlete myself. She didn't play professional sports, but she was a great athlete. And I always, I always was worried about, and she decided not to play in college because she said, I don't want to, work. I don't want a paycheck from my college. I just want to go to college.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, up to you. We'll give up the scholarship, but
Oh my God, it's tough.
Yeah. But she did, and she made a good choice for herself. But I think it's hard. And fortunately, she could make that choice. Not everyone can make that choice. She could make that choice.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. But anyway.
So very much. And your shirt will be in the mail. We have
I'm looking forward to it.
Mother Against Racism with the mask. That's all we're really doing to try to,
Wonderful.
raise some, get some donations for our nonprofit organization. So we'll be sending you your shirt and your mask. But
Thank you.
we really enjoy your conversation. We really enjoy your passion. We really enjoy your passion to reach back and to bring people along and to educate, mothers and educate so many people. I think, like you said, once you get to know someone's story, you really understand who they are and where they come from. And that's what we're hoping. We're hoping to end racism by telling people stories so they could see us as human. They could see us as people. They could see us as mothers, And
Absolutely.
we just definitely appreciate you sharing your story, and best of luck to you and your sons and
Thanks so
and
much.
every endeavor that you
Appreciate it.
have. And thank you for being you. Thank you for reaching back. I was, you
Thank
and
you
I met
so much.
over a phone conversation
I
maybe about a
know.
month ago, and I just love
Yeah.
your story, and you just be phenomenal for our audience to hear how it should be done with passion and concern for everybody, not only yours, but everyone.
And if people want to reach out to me, they can reach out to me at djthefootballmom@gmail. So djthefootballmom@gmail if they want to reach
Oh,
out.
that's great. That's
Yes,
great. And
indeed.
do you have a Facebook page that we
I
can put
do.
up?
Coaching. It's called Coaching the Dream Book
Okay.
on
All right.
Facebook. That
And
is
how many
correct.
books have you written?
I've only written one, and I'm working on another one right now.
Oh, you are?
Also with
Oh,
parents. Yeah.
okay.
Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
Well, I'm going to have to check out your book. That's
Alrighty, for sure.
I have so many wonderful books to read now.
Oh, I know. How
We've
wonderful
had
is that?
we've had all these wonderful female authors on that are just like written such great things.
Aren't women wonderful?
Going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's keep it going, ladies. Let's keep it
Yes,
going. Our
Okay.
indeed.
jobs are not done.
Oh
Thank
gosh,
Alrighty.
you,
no.
Deborah.
Take
Thank you,
Thank
care.
you,
everyone,
Thank
for
Deborah.
you.
watching. All
Bye
right,
All right.
bye.
bye-bye.